Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Human Rights, the show in which we discuss all things related to human rights. I'm your host, Julz Allender, and I am part of the California chapter of Youth for Human Rights International. As you know, Youth for Human Rights International's purpose is to enlighten and educate people around the world on what their human rights are, with specific focus on the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And with this education, to enable and inspire the youth of today as our leaders of tomorrow to stand up and secure these rights for themselves and all people on earth. For each show, we like to take up one right and try to broaden your understanding of how this right is important to you and your loved ones. But for today's show, we will be looking at where do your rights come from? But before we dive into that, let's take a look at a few of the human rights. The first right we're going to take a look at is Article 12. Article 12 is the right to privacy, which states, "No one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon this honor and reputation. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks." Let's take a look at a short video about this specific human right.
How's it going? Oh, it's a letter for today. Maybe she wants us to give it to her. Read it. 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 Read it.
Hey, I think you dropped this.
If only every child was that kind, this world would look vastly different. And that is what we're going for. And with Article 12, safeguards our privacy, family, home, and correspondence from arbitrary interference and protects our honor and reputation. In today's digital age, this right is under constant threat. Every click, every swipe, every post can be tracked, recorded, and scrutinized. So how do we defend this right? By advocating for robust data protection laws, by educating ourselves and others about digital security, and by choosing to support platforms that respect our privacy. Remember, defending our privacy is not about hiding secrets. It's about maintaining dignity and control over our personal lives. It's about telling the world that our private life is our own, and it deserves respect. Next, we're going to look at Article 13, Freedom of Movement, which states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country." Let's take a look at a short video about this specific human right.
Where would I go if the world had no limits? If I could defy all boundaries? If I could ride the wind? Where would it take me? If all roads were open to me, where would I go? If I could fly, if I were free to move.
Article 13, which guarantees the freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state and the right to leave and return to one's country. This article speaks to the core of human freedom, the ability to choose where we live, to travel, to explore, and to return home. However, many around the world are not free to move. Borders and bureaucracies can bind us tightly as chains. So how can we support this right? By speaking out against unjust immigration laws and practices, by supporting organizations that assist refugees and immigrants, and by demanding fair treatment of all individuals regardless of their origin. Next, we're going to look at Human Right 14, which is the right to asylum, and it states, everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. This right may not be invoked in the case of prosecutions generally arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. Let's take a look at a short video on this human right. Article 14 is a beacon of hope. It grants the right to seek asylum from persecution in other countries. Yet, this is not a blanket right. It excludes those fleeing non-political crimes or actions against UN principles. Here, we must fight misinformation and xenophobia, which often skew public perception against asylum seekers. We must educate ourselves on the complexities of international and humanitarian laws and advocate for policies that uphold the dignity and rights of refugees. Let's take a look at the next right, Article 15, the right to a nationality, which states, everyone has the right to a nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. Let's take a look at a short video on this human right.
I'm Chinese.
I am Russian.
I am East African.
I'm Canadian.
I am Filipino.
I am Irish.
I am Bulgarian.
Korean.
I am American.
I am Brazilian.
Italian.
Mexican.
I'm British.
Swedish.
French.
I'm Israeli.
Mongolian. I'm South African.
Japanese.
We are mankind.
First and foremost, we are all mankind. First and foremost, we are all mankind and should treat each other as such. Article 15 emphasizes the right to a nationality and protects against being arbitrarily deprived of this nationality. Nationality is not just about a passport or a set of legal rights. It's about identity, community, and belonging. To defend this right, we must oppose statelessness and discrimination in nationality laws. We must support initiatives that help people obtain legal recognition and advocate for the rights of stateless individuals. As we reflect on these articles, let's remember that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was created with the belief that respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms are the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Each of us has a role in upholding these rights, not just for ourselves, but for every person sharing this planet with us. Now let's take a look at where do your rights come from. I'm talking today on human rights as they are delineated by the United Nations Charter on Human Rights. In this charter, there are 30 separate articles or rights, and more than a few with subheaders to make more than 50 rights in total. To go over each of these rights today would be a long, drawn-out conversation, but I think a better conversation is to talk about where these rights come from. What is the source of these rights? The question I am posing is, how is it you even have them? Did someone fight for them and give them to you? Or did you inherit them from an ancestor? Did some power or politician with a stroke of a pen sign them into law? Or did you get them from a genie or win them in a lottery? I think knowing how it is that you have rights is the best place to start to understand these 50 or so different rights. Because without knowing how it is you have these rights, you are kind of left waiting for the giver of rights to explain them to you. So let's figure out who this mystery man is. In the document Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is a preamble. The word preamble means the introduction to a formal document that explains its purpose. The first sentence in the preamble for the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights says this: whereas recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Right there in that first sentence, you are told where your rights come from. It says that they are inherent and inalienable. To be very clear, let's define these words. The definition of inherent: existing as a natural or basic part of something, permanently existing in something inseparably attached or connected naturally, pertaining to. Something that is inherent is a natural and normal part of the whole. Branches are inherent to a tree, fur is inherent to a bear. All right, well, what does inalienable mean? Inalienable comes from the word alienable. The definition of alienable is 1, transferable to the ownership of another, and definition number 2, capable of being sold or transferred to another. Land is alienable according to the laws of the state. And then we have the prefix in. What is the definition of in? Not or opposite of. So when in is used, it is to negate or indicate the opposite meaning of a word. Examples: inaccurate means not accurate. Inactive means not active. If alienable means capable of being transferred, then inalienable means you cannot transfer them. If alienable means something that you can sell, then inalienable means unable to sell them. They don't wash off. A doctor cannot surgically cut them out. No exceptions. Another example of inalienable: a mother or father, a brother or a sister is inalienable. You will always be the mother or father of that child. A brother or a sister to a sibling, you cannot ever lose that title. So your rights are inherent to you. They are as natural to you as your eye color. They are inalienable to you. Cannot ever lose them, sell them, or in any way transfer them to another or have them taken away. But you say, what about the guy in prison? Or the child being bullied? Surely their rights have been taken away? No. Their rights are being suppressed, but they are not being taken away. You cannot take them away. No judge can proclaim with the pounding of his gavel, you are sentenced to 2 years with no rights. Rights are non-negotiable, but evil people can create an environment where you feel that way. You can be tricked into believing that your rights are gone. A set of circumstances is created where the natural feeling of having rights cannot be experienced. Living amongst criminals gives one that feeling. In the case of a criminal caught up in a justice system, we are looking at someone who has been caught, the criminal, creating a situation where another person felt their rights were taken away by the criminal. And society, lacking a better way of dealing with the criminal, just gives them what he was giving everyone else: an inability to experience his inalienable rights. But even in this case, the criminal's rights are still his. Now, this word inalienable hasn't always been used when describing human rights. And though I am no expert, I do believe that the first time it was used was in a formal document, the American Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson. Prior to that, and likely where Mr. Jefferson got the idea, was from John Locke, who was a 17th century English philosopher, but he used the term natural rights in his second treaty of government. Here, John Locke explains that humans are inherently entitled to certain rights, such as life, liberty, and property, which cannot be surrendered or transferred because they are derived from natural law. By natural law, he means it is just our nature. It is not dependent on governments or institutions. It is not man-made. It is the nature of man to be expressed himself freely, to seek happiness, liberty, and property. John Locke wanted to explain that government was there to serve the people and not the other way around, and spent most of his first treatise arguing that the King of England was just another member of society, and that your rights didn't come from the king, but they just existed. It was common in the 17th century for people to believe their rights had been granted to them by the king or their lord. You could say that a certain political environment created an oppressive situation where people came to believe their rights were not inherent or inalienable. Prior to John Locke, St. Thomas Aquinas explained that people had natural rights as they were created in God's image, and that image by its nature had rights. Roman tradition from the 1st century, expressed by the politician Cicero, 1st century BCE, promoted the idea that there are universal laws derived from nature that apply to all humans, regardless of local customs or laws. Quote, "True law is right reason in agreement with nature." Roman law emphasized jus naturale, natural law, a foundational principle in Roman legal thought. Greek philosophy talked about it through Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. These philosophers laid early groundwork for the idea that there is a natural order to the universe, including human affairs. Aristotle distinguished between laws that are conventional, man-made, and those that are natural, derived from nature or reason. So you can see that this has been being talked about for a very, very long time. The concept of rights, what they are, where they come from, or who or what grants them, has been the subject of philosophical debate for centuries. Yet, at its core, the answer is remarkably simple. Your rights are inherent to you. They are not bestowed upon you by a government, a document, or an international organization. They exist simply because you exist. This is the truth that must underpin any meaningful discussion or study about human rights. Understanding that rights are inherent is not a mere academic exercise. It has profound practical implications. When people believe their rights are granted by a document or an institution, they risk becoming dependent on those institutions for their freedoms. Worse, they may come to accept the idea that those rights can be taken away. This misconception is a tool of oppression, for it allows those in power to frame rights as privileges that can be revoked under certain conditions. This condition of believing that your rights can be taken away has to be in place before anyone can oppress you. Misconceptions about the source of rights. If you were to ask the average person where their rights come from, most, at least in my country, they would point to the U.S. Constitution or some other legal document. Even well-educated individuals with Ivy League diplomas who argue cases before the highest courts often speak as though rights are guaranteed or granted by these documents. They describe themselves as defenders of rights enshrined in law. But this language perpetuates a dangerous misconception that rights are conferred by human institutions. This is a false idea. This view reveals a subtle yet profound conditioning. To accept that one's rights derive from a document rather than being inherent and is inalienable is to concede a certain dependency on external authorities. It implies that without these documents or institutions, rights might not exist at all. How did we arrive at a place where that which is intrinsic to our very being, our freedom, dignity, and autonomy, is seen as something bestowed upon us by others? In reality, your rights are inherent and inalienable. They are not products of governments or charters. They are not privileges granted by institutions, nor can they be revoked by them. They are fundamental part of your humanity. To put it plainly, you are free because that is the nature of being human. So when you're reading the United Nations Charter on Human Rights, don't dream about them in some distant future, but rather as a description of you. And with that, I would like to leave you with this video on the history of human rights.
Human rights is, geez, that's a good question.
Human rights. Well, that's a tough one.
Wow.
I don't even know how to give that a definition.
I would probably have to do a little bit of homework or something.
Yeah, any right that I think just as a normal, human,
The rights that humans have.
Oh, that's a very large debate.
Tú le puedes preguntar a 20 personas y te van a dar 20 diferentes opiniones.
Non saprei, è una domanda complicatissima.
Yes, we just take them for granted that they're there, but we don't even consider what they are.
حقوق بشر، حقوقی که به شما تعلق داره صرفاً به خاطر اینکه بشر هستید. شیوهی که طبیعتاً انتظار دارید با شما رفتار بشه و سزاوارش هستید، مثل حق آزاد زیستن، حق بیان عقیده و حق برابری با دیگران. حقوق زیادی وجود دارند و بیشترشون متعلق به گروه‌های خاصی هستند. اما حقوق بشر تنها حقوقیه که قطعاً در همه جا و در مورد همه صدق میکنه. یعنی بچه‌ها، پیرا، فقیرا، بازیکن‌های بسکتبال، کارگرا، خواننده‌های رپ، معلم‌ها، آفریقایی‌ها، سرخپوستا، آلبانی‌ها، مسیحی‌ها، مسلمان‌ها، یهودی‌ها، بیدینا، مادرتون، پدرتون، همسایه‌تون و شما همگی دقیقاً حقوق یکسانی دارید. به عبارت دیگه این حقوق جهانیه. اما این سوال هنوز باقی میمونه. این حقوق چی هستن؟
Name the human rights?
What the human rights are?
The right to live.
Equality between all peoples.
Right to religion, the right to...
Is there supposed to be a list somewhere I should be aware of?
بنابر منشور سازمان ملل در مجموع حقوق بشر شامل 30 مورده که معمولاً با همدیگه و به سادگی حقوق بشر گفته میشن. این حقوق همگی در اعلامیه جهانی حقوق بشر که در این زمینه معتبرترین سند دنیاست لیست شدن. اما خیلی طول کشیده تا به اینجا برسیم. در ابتدا اصلاً حقوق بشری وجود نداشت. اگه عضو گروه خاصی بودید، امنیت داشتید. وگرنه خب نداشتید. اما بعد شخصی به نام کوروش کبیر تصمیم گرفت کل این شرایط رو عوض کنه. اون بعد از پیروزی بر بابل دست به عملی کاملا انقلابی زد. اعلام کرد همه برده‌ها آزادن که برن. علاوه بر این گفت که مردم در انتخاب مذهب خود آزاد هستند، صرف نظر از اینکه عضو چه گروهی باشند. مردم گفته‌های اونو بر لوحی سفالی که به استوانه کوروش شناخته شده ثبت کردند و به همین سادگی حقوق بشر شکل گرفت. این ایده به سرعت در یونان، هندوستان و سرانجام در روم گسترش پیدا کرد. اونا متوجه شدن که مردم طبیعتاً از قوانین خاصی پیروی میکنن، حتی اگه بهشون چنین چیزی گفته نشده باشه. اینا رو قوانین طبیعی نامیدن. اما کسایی که قدرت در دستشون بود مرتب این قوانین رو زیر پا میذاشتن. 1000 سال گذشت تا بالاخره در انگلستان پادشاهی اومد که قبول کرد هیچ کس نمیتونه حقوق مردم رو زیر پا بذاره، حتی یه پادشاه. بالاخره حقوق مردم به رسمیت شناخته شد و دیگه اونا از دست صاحبان قدرت در امان بودن. البته تا حدی. تا وقتی که یه عده شورشی انگلیسی استقلال خودشون رو اعلام نکردن، پادشاه اینو قبول نکرده بود که همه آدما برابر آفریده شدن. البته نمیشه گفت که اون با این ایده موافق بود، ولی نمیتونست جلوشون رو بگیره و اینجوری بود که آمریکا به وجود اومد. فرانسوی‌ها بلافاصله برای حقوق خودشون انقلاب کردند. لیست اونا حتی طولانی‌تر بود و اصرار داشتن که این قوانین ساختگی نیستن، طبیعی‌اند. چیزی که مردم روم قوانین طبیعی می‌دونستن، تبدیل به حقوق طبیعی شد. متاسفانه همه از این موضوع چندان خوشحال نشدن. در فرانسه ژنرالی به اسم ناپلئون تصمیم گرفت که دموکراسی جدید فرانسه رو سرنگون کنه و خودش امپراتور اعلام کنه. امپراتور دنیا، و تقریباً هم موفق شد. ولی کشورهای اروپایی با هم متحد شدن و اونو شکست دادن. حقوق بشر دوباره موضوع داغ روز شد. قراردادهای بین‌المللی بسته شدن و در سرتاسر اروپا حقوق بسیاری به مردم تعلق گرفت. ولی فقط در اروپا. سایر نقاط دنیا هنوز نه تنها به نوعی از این حقوق محروم بودند، بلکه از طرف امپراتوری‌های بزرگ اروپا مورد تهاجم، تسخیر و بهره‌کشی قرار گرفتند. اما بعد وکیل جوانی از هندوستان تصمیم گرفت که این شرایط باید خاتمه پیدا کنه. اسمش مهاتما گاندی بود و علیرغم خشونتی که باش مواجه بود اصرار داشت که همه مردم دنیا حقوقی دارن، نه فقط مردم اروپا. و بالاخره حتی اروپایی هم کم کم با اون موافقت کردن. البته به این سادگی هم نبود. 2 جنگ جهانی اتفاق افتاد. هیتلر نیمی از یهودی‌ها رو در اردوگاه‌های مرگبار و وحشتناک نازی‌ها از بین برد. روی هم رفته 90 میلیون نفر کشته شدند. حقوق بشر هیچ وقت تا این اندازه به مرز نابودی نزدیک نشده بود و دنیا هیچ وقت به این شدت نیاز به تغییر نداشت. به این طریق کشورهای دنیا با هم متحد شدند و سازمان ملل رو تأسیس کردند. هدف اصلی اونا تاکید دوباره بر ایمان به حقوق اساسی بشر، کرامت و ارزش شخص انسان بود. ولی حقوق بشر چی بودند؟ بیانیه کوروش کبیر، قوانین طبیعی روم یا اعلامیه فرانسه؟ به نظر میرسی که عقیده‌های مردم یکم با هم فرق میکرد که حقوق بشر چی باید باشه. اما زیر نظر النور روزولت بالاخره همه با مجموعه‌ای از حقوق که بدون استثنا در مورد تمام انسان‌ها صدق میکرد موافقت کردند. اعلامیه جهانی حقوق بشر. چیزی که فرانسوی حقوق طبیعی میدونستن بالاخره تبدیل به حقوق بشر شد. پس به طور خلاصه اولش فقط تعداد کمی از مردم که خوششانس بودن یه حقایی داشتن، تا اینکه یک از اونا تصمیم گرفت و گفت آدمای دیگه هم باید یه حقایی داشته باشن، که خیلی خوب بود. ولی همه موافق نبودن و فقط یه چندین هزار سال جنگ و بیانیه تصویب کردن و جنگ‌های بیشتر لازم بود تا بالاخره همه قبول کنن حقوق بشر به همه تعلق داره. و از اون به بعد همه به خوبی و خوشی زندگی کردن. فقط یه مشکل کوچیک وجود داشت. اگه مردم حق غذا و سرپناه دارن، چرا هر روز 16,000 بچه از گرسنگی میمیرن؟ هر 5 ثانیه یکی. اگه مردم آزادی بیان دارن، چرا هزاران نفر به خاطر ابراز عقیدهشون تو زندونا هستن؟ اگه مردم حق دارن تحصیل کنن، چرا بیشتر از 1 میلیارد بزرگسال سواد خوندن ندارن؟ اگه بردهداری واقعا از بین رفته، چرا در حال حاضر هنوز 27 میلیون برده داریم؟ بیشتر از 2 برابر تعداد برده‌ها در سال 1800 میلادی. واقعیت اینه، وقتی که اعلامیه جهانی حقوق بشر امضا شد، رعایت کردنش قانوناً اجباری نبود، بلکه اختیاری بود. و علیرغم وجود تعداد زیادی اسناد، توافقنامه‌ها، قراردادها و قانون‌های دیگه، این حقوق هنوز چیزی بیشتر از کلمات نوشته شده روی کاغذ نیستن. پس سوال اینه، چه کسی این کلمه‌ها رو تبدیل به واقعیت میکنه؟ وقتی دکتر لوتر کینگ برای برابری نژادی راهپیمایی کرد، برای حقوقی که نزدیک به 2 دهه قبل سازمان ملل تضمین کرده بود راهپیمایی کرد، ولی هنوز راهپیمایی کرد. وقتی در دهه 1980 نلسون ماندلا برای عدالت اجتماعی قیام کرد، تقریباً 40 سال بود که کشورش با از بین بردن چنین تبعیضاتی موافقت کرده بود، اما هنوز جنگید. اونایی که امروز در برابر شکنجه، فقر و تبعیض می‌جنگن، انسان‌های قوی هیکل یا ابرقهرمان نیستن. اونا مردمن. بچه‌ها، مادرها، پدرها، معلم‌ها و آزاداندیشانی که از سکوت خودداری میکنن. کسایی هستن که فهمیدن حقوق بشر یه درس تاریخ یا کلمات نوشته شده روی کاغذ نیست. حقوق بشر سخنرانی، آگهی بازرگانی یا تبلیغات گسترده نیست، بلکه تصمیماتی هستن که ما هر روز به عنوان یک انسان میگیریم. اونا مسئولیتایی هستن که همه ما باید به عهده بگیریم. احترام گذاشتن به هم، کمک کردن به هم و حمایت از نیازمندان. همونطور که النور روزولت گفت، حقوق جهانی بشر اصلا از کجا شروع میشه؟ از جاهای کوچیک، نزدیک به خونه، اونقدر نزدیک و اونقدر کوچیک که در هیچ نقشه از دنیا نمیشه پیداشون کرد. ولی اونا هنوز دنیای خود فرد هستن. محله که توش زندگی میکنه، مدرسه یا دانشگاهش، کارخونه، مزرعه یا دفتری که توش کار میکنه. جاهایی که توی اونا هر مرد و زن و کودکی خواهان برابری در مقابل قانون، برابری در فرصت‌های کاری و برابری ارزش انسان‌ها بدون تبعیض هستند. اگه این قوانین در این جاها مفهومی نداشته باشند، در هیچ جای دیگه هم مفهومی نخواهند داشت.